Okay, so we have another problem up here. This one's going to be a little bit more complicated. And the reason why this is going to be complicated is remember how I talked about the setup before? We said, notice if you have any gaps. See how it goes from x to the 4 to x squared? There's no x cubed. Or notice it goes from x squared to 6. There's no plain x's. So this one's going to be a little bit trickier. But remember, it's the same steps that we have here, just a little harder problem. So before we start, we're going to do our setup. Because right now we only have a fraction bar, we want to have a long division. So you know that our divisor and our dividend, let's put them up. On top, if you didn't know, will always be your dividend. So that's going to go inside the house. And what's at the bottom, your denominator, outside. So here's our divisor. Now notice I told you our dividend had some gaps. So this is where we're going to do what we call a placeholder. We have x to the 4th, but notice we don't have an x cubed. So I'm going to put a 0 x cubed. This is saying I have 0 of the x cubes. But I do have x squares, so I'm going to put that next. But notice I don't have any single x's, so I'm going to use another gap holder. So saying 0 of the single x's. And then my constant term is going to be written last. Now, not every problem you'll be using these placeholders, but they're there in case we do, when we do our multiplication, we get an x cubed or a single x, we have a place to line them up. Because remember, we have to line things up under like terms. So if you don't have an x cubed up here, but somehow you get an x cubed down here, you don't know where to line it up. So that's why I always suggest, make sure this is in descending order with no gaps. See how it goes 4, 3, 2, 1, and then none. Now that we have this set up, remember our steps. Step 1 is divide first term and dividend, list the first term and divisor. Whatever answer we get, we'll put it in the quotient area. And then we're going to multiply that answer with the entire divisor. We're going to do our subtraction, A, B, C. And then bring down our next term and repeat the same 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's kind of like doing the loss, 1, 2, 3, 4. Over on the side, remember, I do my 1, 2, 3, 4 to keep things more organized since I know this is a more complicated problem. So our first term in our dividend over our first term in our divisor. So x to the 4th over x squared. Here you can clearly see we have more x's on top, 4 versus 2. So I'm going to have x squared, extra 2. Once you get step 1 answer, just put it up here. Now, it doesn't really matter where it goes. I always was trained to put it over the square term, but if you put it over here, it'll be the same. Once you do that, step 2 says take your answer from step 1, and we're going to multiply with our entire divisor. So we're going to just distribute. You know that x squared times x squared, you add the exponent for the product rule, and you get x to the 4th. And then x squared times 1, 1 times anything is the other guy, so it'd be 1x squared. But remember, before I actually line them up, I'm going to have to do the A, B, C of step 3. A, change the signs to the opposite. So this was a positive, becomes a negative. This was a positive, so we'll make it a negative. That's A. B, now line them up. So notice the negative x to the 4th will go with the x to the 4th guy. Notice the negative 1x squared will go with the x squared guy. So it looks like I didn't really need this x cubed as a placeholder, but it's always good to always put in those holders in case you never know when you need them in a problem. X to the 4th, negative x to the 4th, they cancel out. This, since it's 0, no even there. And here, a positive 5 and a negative 1. Remember, tug of war for part C. We're going to get a 4. Positive team is going to win. X squared stays x squared. So now what we're going to do is we're going to bring down the next term. Since this is 0, I'm going to bring down this guy, positive 6 for right now. Since I brought down a term, we're going to go, again, repeat the steps. 1, 2, 3, 4. So step 1, this is now our first term in our dividend. Remember, the x to the fourths got canceled out. So we're going to start with 4x squared. And over the same first term of the divisor, this is still here, x squared. Now notice when you have x squared on top, x squared on the bottom, 2x's on top, 2x's on the bottom, they cancel out to be 4. And we know it's going to be a positive. So we're going to take this positive 4 and put it up in the quotient area. So we're done step 1. Step 2 says take this 4 that we just got and then multiply by the entire divisor. X squared plus 1 and distribute. When you distribute, we're going to get a positive 4x squared and a positive 4, but notice I put it here in step 3. I didn't line it up yet, because when I do step 3, there's an A, B, and a C. Change this to a negative, opposite sign. Change this to the opposite, which is a negative. Now that I changed the signs, we can line them up. It's part B. And then part C is just collect like terms. Notice x squared was x squared, positive and a negative. You'll learn every time that you do this, these must cancel out. They'll always be additive inverses. They'll always cancel out. And then this, you know, a positive and a negative, we subtract. So we're going to get a 2. Who wins the tug of war? 6 players versus 4 players. This has more players, so it's going to be a positive 2. So notice we have nothing left to bring down. So since I don't have anything to bring down, I can't repeat the steps of 1, 2, 3, 4. But we have a remainder. The last question that we didn't have any remainder. Well, this one does. So how do I write my final answer? Remember, I told you take the quotient, which is the stuff on top. This is not going to be in a fraction. Then take your remainder. This is the only part that will be part of a fraction. You're going to say plus, because it's positive. And then this is always your numerator, or a fancy way of saying top of your fraction. And your entire divisor, x squared plus 1, would be the bottom, or your denominator. Only for this one little area, the remainder part. These two are technically whole items. So our final answer is going to be this. X squared plus 4 plus 2 over x squared plus 1. A little trickier because we had to do placeholders, but the same 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 step that we learned.